Welcome to Chalk and Code,
where the science of learning meets modern technology.
We're bringing together entrepreneurs, product leaders, researchers, and advocates
to spark ideas, challenge assumptions, and shape the future of learning. Welcome to Chalk and Code, where we explore new and novel directions in education, technology, and leadership. Today's guest is Dr. Greg Gage. He's a neuroscientist and educator who earned his doctorate at the University of Michigan, where he and his colleague Tim Marzullo co-founded Backyard Brains. That was in 2009, I believe. In 2022, they co-authored a book, How Your Brain Works. It's available on Amazon. Dr. Gage is also a TED Talk Senior Fellow and a recipient of the White House Champion of Change Award. That was under President Obama's term. Backyard Brains is an Ann Arbor-based company that democratizes neuroscience by providing affordable, hands-on kits that allow students and hobbyists to see and hear real neural activity. And Dr. Gage joins us today to talk about his journey from neuroscientist to entrepreneur, the business of making brain science accessible to everybody, and how Backyard Brains bridges the gap between cutting-edge research and the classroom. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me here at school.
It is a great pleasure. So if you would start off with just a bit about your history, how you got to where you are today, what kind of led you down the path with Backyard Brains?
Yeah, I went to, it's unheard of nowadays, but I went to college. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I was a no prof major, and I just went through the first full year, auditing classes. I'm taking classes, but just kind of going there to kind of figure out what I liked. And I heard a physics lecture about the electron, and I was just so engaged with that. I was like blown away. And I remember thinking, like, looking around, I was like, anyone else hearing this? This is so amazing, like that this stuff works, and that we understand it so well, right? So after that lecture, I decided I wanted to be an electrical engineer, and I declared my major, and I got my electrical engineering degree. So that's how it started. And I got a job. I worked for AT&T. I was developing circuit boards. But I moved to Europe at that time, and I was getting kind of bored. So the way my brain works, I get very agitated. I do the same thing over and over again, it seems. And I remember having a conversation with my boss in London this time, and he told me that I needed to become a manager because you want to move up in the company, right? You want to be able to be a successful person. You had to become a manager. And I remember thinking that I did not want to become a manager. I was like, and so that's when I decided that there must be some career path where you could just be a nerd and focus on things that you enjoy and get rewarded for it. And so that's when I realized, like, maybe academia was what I should do. I enjoyed my time at college. I was looking back at where the things that I enjoyed the most, and I like learning new stuff. And so I went and looked. I came home for Christmas, and I went to the university looking around, and I stumbled across a neuroscience lab, and I realized, just like I did before with the electrical engineering stuff, that when I heard a spike for the very first time, a spike is how the brain communicates. Since you have neurons inside your brain fire these electrical impulses. And I may have known that, but it didn't feel as real as it did in that lab, because I was watching on a little monitor a rat, and every time the rat would move its neck, there was a neuron that was recording from the motor cortex, and it would just pop, this huge pop. It was like, and then it got me thinking, like, what is this code that this thing is doing? And I had that same moment where it's like, oh my God, why isn't everybody talking about it? You walk around the street, like, do you understand that we're made out of neurons? So I decided to go to grad school. At that, I actually went to that lab. It's funny, I didn't get funding. I didn't even get into school. I had to, because I was out of school for so long, I didn't do well on the exams, but you got to make your own luck. So I remember reaching out to the chair of the program, explaining, hey man, I haven't been in school for like 8 years, but I'm not doing good on the exams, but I really want to do this. I kind of impressed the guy. So he's like, all right, I'll get you in, but I'm not gonna get you funding. And then I got into the lab that I heard that first spike from, and he's like, I don't have any funding for you. I might just stuck around until they got funding, So you got to make your own luck. So that's how the career started. And the transition into the company is also kind of strange. So I was a chronologically advantaged grad student. I was older than the rest, which is cool because I had business experience, so I could automate all my experiments. That's one of the cool things I tell anyone who wants to go to grad school is make sure you know how to automate stuff, because it makes your life 1,000 times easier when you're recording data and collecting from rats and stuff like that. But I remember we were going out into schools and we were kind of showing off because I realized that I was delayed in figuring out my goal in life, right? And I suspect it was because it was never taught to me. I never learned neuroscience in school, and so I kind of had a personal motivation to make the other kids not have that same experience that I did. And so I would go into classrooms with Tim and with my other lab mate Colin, and we would do various types of activities, trying to get kids interested in neuroscience. We would, paper mache, Frankenstein, scoop out the ice cream brain and talk about how different parts of the brain do different things. But it was not quite as cool. It was a kind of like a meta, right? It was meta experiences that we had in the lab. And so we used it right around the time of the $100 laptop. It came out of MIT, right? So we were thinking, can we do a $100 spike? My background's electrical engineering, and so we're looking at the amps they had. We can build this thing, and so we did a poster. So one of the things you do in science is you have scientific posters. I know kids think that those science fair posters are just for science fairs. No, that's like how majority of science is done, is through posters. So the Society for Neuroscience is one of the largest. It is the largest neuroscience meeting. There's like 25,000 neuroscientists show up for this one spot, right? And so we did a poster there that kind of was a self-imposed engineering challenge. We said, you write the abstracts like in February, March, but you don't present the poster until like November, right? So you have this whole almost 2/3 of a year to before you do it. So we put in the poster that we're going to do this challenge. We call it the $100 spike. The spike is the unit of activity of the neuron, and we're going to see if we can record a neuron for less than $100. And so we worked on it that summer. We put some circuits together. Tim had the idea of using an insect. So we had, first we were working with crickets, and we moved to cockroaches soon after that. We presented the poster. We presented we're kind of good at satire. So we were doing the previous years, we always had satirical posters about either our work or our colleagues' work, kind of making fun of what scientists do and they shouldn't do. And we like the idea of satire because you laugh at first, but then you think about it a second. And we published a number of our papers in the Annals of Probable Research. That's that Harvard journal for the Ig Nobel Prizes. So we had this idea of presenting the $100 spike in a satirical way. And so we presented it as a cure for the zombie apocalypse, because if you had the zombie apocalypse, you would have had a neurological affliction, because if you watch zombie movies, they change their gait, right? They change their eating behavior. So it has to be neurological in nature. And so we were saying that if your loved ones got stricken by the zombie virus and you're trying to cure it, right? What could you do? You can't go into vendors because they're all turned into zombies, but you can break in your Radio Shack at night. So we had a little circuit board for Radio Shack that we built the thing on. You can put this together, right? So the idea was that to kind of make it a little bit more of a spectacle, to get more people interested in what we were working on. And it worked. So we got a huge crowd, like for days. The crowds kept getting bigger. They kept coming, hey, go back and check out these guys. And at one point, the journal Nature, that's the number one science nature in the world, right? It's 300 years ago it started. So there was an editor there that was coming by, reporter, and he was kind of doing stuff on Society for Neuroscience. And they came across this big crowd. Like, what's going on? They're listening to us, and they're like, "Oh man, this is super cool." And so we got written up we got on the Nature podcast, and that kind of launched it all. So I remember, I mean, at that time, I was in a different lab at this point. I was in the biopsych department, and I was working on the basal ganglia. This is the part of the brain that is affected by dopamine, and it changes your decision making, and so when you get rewards, right? And so the idea is of me publishing these high profile papers and no one saying anything, but this stupid side project, which we just did just for fun over the summer. I kept getting emails because people like heard it or read about it, right? And they're like, "Oh man, this is super cool." And then slowly, my basal ganglia started to fire, right? And I started to change my behavior, and I realized with my co-founder Tim, who's my lab mate, hey, maybe this could be the real deal, right? And so we put together an idea to form this organization called Backyard Brains, and we're going to build these equipment. So we kind of bootstrapped the company. And we're able to get what's called SBIR funding. This is the Small Business Innovative Research Grants. And that has been, that was over 15 years ago. So that's, we've been kind of growing ever since. So it's been an exciting side project that turned into an alternative postdoc, which turned into an alternative career, which is not what I was expecting.
Right. I've watched a number of the TED Talks and the videos that you've recorded where you attach electrodes to like usually audience members' forearms, and then show the activity as they kind of squeeze their hand. And you can, if memory serves, you could also hear it as well as the neurons fired. And then
yeah, that's the idea, is that the electricity inside of your body is the same as electricity inside lights, inside of speakers. And so the inventions we make are just little amplifiers. And so just like many things in science, you make things bigger, right? So microscopes make cells bigger, telescopes make planets bigger, right? And this makes little bits of electricity inside of your body bigger. And so then once you put that electricity against a speaker, you can then hear the frequencies that are being generated by those things. And those frequencies are very fast because these are on the order of 1 kilohertz or 1,000. So it's like EMG is a little bit slower. It's about 300 hertz, but the idea is that it's you could actually hear how the neurons in the brain change their firing behaviors based upon your voluntary movements.
So tell me a little bit more about Backyard Brains today, because you've grown quite a lot. I wondered, for example, if you had to kind of sum it up.
Yeah, we've gone through different phases. So we started with invertebrates because I think, my first love has always been the spike. And so we do, we give a lot of talks and stuff, but I always try to start with our cockroach experiments, because that very first thing that we did at that conference in 2008 was this idea of putting pins inside of an insect and being able to amplify the individual action potentials of spikes that are coming from the neurons inside of there. And so I love that, because it's not like a cockroach has smaller neurons. Their cells are the same size as ours, roughly, right? So it's like their neurons are almost identical to ours. And so by putting these pins inside of this insect, you can actually hear if I were to drill into your head and put wires inside your head, you would hear the same thing I heard on that screen that got me interested in neuroscience, right? And so we used to keep track of how many kids heard a spike for the very first time. We had this little database, and once it got out of our control and everyone else is doing it, we kind of stopped there. It was hard to keep track, but but that moment of hearing a spike is super important to me, because that's when people get the realization that it's like in the movie The Matrix, and you realize, oh my God, like that, I'm dating myself, but that stuff, it's like, that's reality, right? But it's cool because the spike that we show on the screen is green, right? It's on an oscilloscope app, and that is reality. It's like It's like the fourth level of consciousness when you realize that that Greg Gage is a representation from, billions of intelligent cells that are communicating, which is kind of weird. But that's kind of, but that thing is my favorite thing to do.
Are there other
Yeah.
products in the market?
Yeah, so
like
that was
that?
so we started with that, and the next one we came out with was in the same insect realm. We made a backpack for cockroaches. We call it the Roboroach. It was the world's first commercially available cyborg in the history of mankind, and as of today, we released that back in like 2013, and as of today, 12 years later, it's still the only commercially available cyborg. And so what's cool about that one is that it does not just recording from neurons, right? Now we're going the other way around. We're tickling neurons. And so you can talk to neurons using electricity, and you can record from neurons using electricity, right? And so by pushing a little bit of current into the neurons, you get them to fire. And so this is an invention that you put a backpack onto a cockroach, and you talk over Bluetooth to the backpack, and you can send a signal from your cell phone as you're swiping it, and it goes into the antenna lobe, tickles those neurons with electricity, and then the perception inside of the cockroach is that it's being touched, and it will move in a certain behavior. So that was our next big invention that we came up with. I remember we launched that on Kickstarter, and we got more, not likes, but shares on social media, or just on Facebook than we did get backers. And so I think it was more more of a viral sensation than a success. But we got that one funded, and we moved on to human ephys. So we spent a good decade developing, EEG, which is the thing for your brain here, EKGs, EOGs, electroculograms, EMGs for the muscles, electromyograms. And so being able to, do all this physiology, and that's what led to the development of the book. So we have a book called How Your Brain Works. And this is just filled with all the experiments to record from like neurons and spikes and stuff like that. And we kind of step by step. And what I like about that book is some of the experiments don't work. And so we tried to show the dirty laundry, right? We have an experiment on meditation, and we brought in expert meditators, and we were hook them up with EEG. We could measure, but we couldn't detect, if your meditation's in a state, you should be able to measure that in the brain, right? But you couldn't. At least we couldn't. It may have been, we've read some papers where you could, but maybe they all had a certain type of meditators to be able to see it, get enough power to see it. But anyway, so that was the next phase. And then we moved into brain machine interfaces, making devices that work with your brain, right? So we would have a claw that would be able to, you can control a claw, and it would pick things up. We tried to do it with the Arduino. It didn't really take off. Teachers don't like using Arduinos, but we did switch over to the microbit. That's just relatively recently. We're kind of slow learners on that one. But our spiker bit accessory just launched actually today with microbit. And what that does, it makes a brain machine interface that allows students to program, cool inventions just from block codes. They can take their muscle activity or their brain activity or their heartbeats and make things made out of cardboard and stuff move and come to life. And I think out of all the products that we've developed, this by far is the most creative. I've had the most fun with students developing these types of projects, because students are super creative, right? And so they have ways that they can do things that I never thought of, like tug of war machines, dance machines, like where the beat of the music is controlled by your heartbeat. So the faster you dance, the faster the music goes, and you get this kind of like this circular thing where the music gets faster. We had another student build conducting wands that would control off the EMG, and then we had one student made a web flinger. As you see, I think these are the strings that shoot out. They made an EMG control, so they had it up their sleeves. So when they make this muscle tense here, it would fire up that thing, so they could shoot out a web from their from up their sleeve. It's kind of cool. Yeah, so like that's been a lot of fun. And then even more recently, we've gotten into more of the computational side. So like at the end of the day, your brain is some type of an analog computer. We don't quite understand how exactly it works, but we do know it's processing information. And we're trying, I think the real breakthroughs that we're going to make in neuroscience are not going to be at the hardware level, which is what this book was about, right? This book was about the hardware level. How do you record from the physical neurons? How do the chemicals of the brain, you know, how you can record from groups of neurons, right? How do the muscle systems work? These are all physical layer stuff. But if you're on a computer, let's say you have a new Windows machine, and you're trying to install a font. What we do in neuroscience today, if we were neuroscientists working on that computer with you, we'd say, okay, you start to unscrew the back, you take out the motherboard, and you start like desoldering resistors and putting another resistor on, trying to figure out how and it's not how it works, right? So it's like the hardware level is not where you want to be asking those questions about where to install fonts, right? That's a software level question. And so we're starting to understand that more in neuroscience, and we're starting to build our tools around that. And so we have our first product that we're going to launch early next year is a robot. Looks like this. And instead of programming it like you would with like a Scratch, like we're doing with the block code and stuff like that, we don't do that because we want to emulate what the brain is actually doing. And so what we have developed, this is with a colleague of mine, Christopher Harris, who we got from the NIH, a brilliant dude. He did this in his garage. And so we brought him on, and over the last about 7 years, we've been cultivating this idea of this robot. We have got a bunch of SBR funding in that. I got a bunch of scientists to work on it. And I think what we've come out with is going to be super cool. So the idea is that you drag neurons onto the screens, you grab this and you move it onto the brain, and then you wire those neurons to each other. And then it's got a camera. So if something passes in front of the camera, you've got a neuron there that will be able to respond and spike. So it's going to spike inside of the computational brain. And then whatever you wire that neuron to will receive those spikes. And then by collecting a series of spikes in the next neuron, that neuron might produce a spike. And at the end of the day, if it hits a neuron in the motor, then that motor is going to turn a little bit. So what that does, it makes the sensory systems of spikes turn into the motor system of spikes, right? And so then that little bit in between is what the brain does, right? It's the thing that produces the behaviors, and it's the biggest mystery I think that we have. And I think by making these tools super accessible, and by allowing students to really understand how the brain works by actually building brains, I always tell scientists, I tell all my scientists, right, you think you know how the brain works? Show me. So I'm just seeing behind me, that's a network from our robot, right? So we have these excitatory and inhibitory cells that together, they just work in a spiking neural network to produce very complex behaviors. And so you can actually make it, this is a good way to think about it. So if you have a neuron, if I have a neuron for this side of my vision and another neuron for this side of the vision, and I got a neuron to walk this way and a neuron to walk this way. So this guy, you can make a neuron fire this wheel and he'll turn this way. You make a neuron fire the wheel and turn that way. But it's cool is that if you have something on the right side of your vision, I can send a spike to the other motor, and that spike will cause that robot to turn, right? And if I overturn it, then this camera will see it, right? And it will send a spike to this one and it turns back. And so with this simple 4 neuron system, you can get a robot to follow you around the room. And if you were and it looks like it has these behavior, it has like agency, right? But it doesn't. You put your probe and the software on it, and all you're hearing are spikes. And so even though this robot is producing these behaviors, at the end of the day, it's just these intelligent cells that are spiking, and they're connecting to each other, and they're producing these really complex behaviors.
As I've been listening to you, there've been a couple of things that have occurred to me, and you tell me if I'm if I've heard you correctly, or if I'm extrapolating correctly. Um, One of the things that I hear you describe is that you almost, I don't want to say stumbled into the creation of Backyard Brains, but that's the word that comes to mind because it almost sounds like you are trying your best to create other neuroscientists who can not just explore the brain and help understand the brain, but possibly even come up with, because of the creativity in students, even come up with new ideas that can, kind of feed back
Absolutely.
into
Yeah.
the science.
No, that's the goal. And it's like it's funny because people think that, you know, artists and scientists are the polar opposite of each other, but no, it's absolutely not the case. The creativity is the most beautiful thing in the world, and I think that's what science allows you to do. It allows you to be super creative. And so what we've been doing in our careers have been kind of floating through and kind of inventing some things ourselves, but mostly just kind of observing what's going on in the literature and bringing those to a whole new generation. And we do it. I can't say that I do it for the kids, no, but I'm just doing it for me. It's super fun to do. I'm curious about how these things work. If I read a paper and I don't believe that could be real, I will try to make it myself. That's one of the things that you learn in grad school. You don't learn much in grad school, right? But you learn how to take big projects and make them into smaller chunks so you can get them done, right? So that's kind of what the PhD is for. And what I like about Backyard Brains is that we have a super shoestring budget, right? So it's like you got to be highly creative to figure out how to replicate. The Roboroach. That was like a multi-million dollar DARPA project, right? But now we sell it for $99. So you you can buy a backpack that does that the same thing. So it's like figuring out how to take that expensive stuff or in distilling it down into what is the core thing that needs to be there, and then once you understand that, how do you make it a bit more accessible, and then can we make it robust for the classroom? Those are the things that we ask. And so we eat our own dog food. We do work with educators, and we published a ton of peer-reviewed literature about how our stuff works in the classroom, and it's kind of a fun. It's a very fun adventure. And so now we're even moving in beyond that. We're getting into kind of metacognition, and we're doing hands-on experiments about how the software of the brain, how these spiking neural networks produce models of ourselves, and we can get kids to think that their noses are coming out of their face because we know how to manipulate the information. We could get you to be convinced that it's not real, but our brains will perceive each other's eyes in the bad part of our vision where we don't have much acuity. Subconsciously, you're imagining a force coming out of these people's eyes, and they touch you. And so those all sound insane. They sound like there's no way that could be true. But what I like about Backyard Brains is that you can ask silly questions, but as long as you answer them very seriously, you're allowed to do that, right? So we've been very careful in our experiments to show that is the case. And so that's kind of what we're working on now, are developing the understanding of, now we understand how the physical layer works. We're going to kind of move up into the psychology part of things and try to understand how do we experience ourselves and how do we experience others. So it's kind of fun.
Sounds like it. Tell me about the business. You mentioned SBIR grants, and the company's been around since 2009. And I wondered if you had advice for other entrepreneurs who are trying to, generate revenue or build a business. What advice would you give them based on your own experiences?
Yeah. Probably wouldn't advise to do it the way we did it. It's like, it's hard, right? So we were, it's, I remember it's not through lack of trying. I remember in the early days, we did go um, to a lot of places in the business school and try to recruit people to come work with us. Uh, but I don't know. I find, uh, I find the marketing and sales side of business very challenging. Um, I don't find a lot of interest in it, and so therefore we tend not to do a lot of marketing and sales, and it's been very bad for us because we're kind of a niche market, right? And so we kind of rely a lot on earned media. And after COVID, it kind of went dark, and I didn't really reach out and get to start things again. So I just started giving talks again. Um, but the so without earned media, that's stuff that where people, the New York Times will do a story, or we were on Netflix a bunch of times, and without that happening, it's hard to maintain the business, right? So we were okay because we had these SBIR grants, and we're like, one of the things we don't have a short supply on is innovation and creativity, and so we were able just to keep writing these grants, and that we're able to fill the rest of our coffers, so we keep our people employed with healthcare and keep creating. Um, but I think that those days are over. Right? I'm not sure there's going to be many more grants for what we want to do for education, and so yeah. So there's gonna be rough roads ahead. So we're trying to move to instead of doing grants, we're moving more to Kickstarter. So we just launched one a couple months ago that we just released the product today, and we're going to be doing the robot in January, and so we're gonna keep going back to kind of this type of marketing campaigns instead of going to grants, which unfortunately, because it's grants are much more funding than these Kickstarter campaigns are, but I think it's enough to get us there until we figure it out. So my advice to someone else is yeah, don't do what we do. Like and this can be advice for very few people. I don't think most people are like this. I remember I turned down a lot of opportunities when I was, I didn't like, I was, I was too into my own head, right? So it was like Apple wanted to give us something, I think at the Apple Developer Conference, but they said I couldn't use the cockroaches. I should have said, okay, I got so much other stuff we could have done, right? But I was like, no, I want to just like, screw you. You're not gonna let me use the cockroach. Like that's dumb, right? So I remember there's a wonderful thing. The guy passed away, Patrick, I don't remember his last name, but he gave a talk on from MIT open courseware called How to Speak. I don't know if you've ever seen this talk, but it was like he was talking directly to me. And I remember he said, you know, he's talking to a class of MIT students, and you guys are here because you wanna bring things to the world. You want to invent things. And your idea is what's important to you. It's not you, it's your idea. And your job is to get your idea to resonate in other people's brains, right? And remember, it's about your idea. It's not about you. If they want you to put a tie on, you put on a goddamn tie and you get in front of like, I'm like, holy shit, this guy's right. It's like, well, I'm doing it all wrong. And I'm thinking about all that stuff. And so, but I suspect I don't have to tell many people that. I think most people have that intuitively inside their heads, right? But I had to be explicitly told that. So anyway, and now I'm looking back like, man, I wish I had any of those opportunities again. But I don't know. We'll get it back. We'll get our mojo back with this. I think this new book we're working on. I can't tell you. I'm super excited about it. It's like I haven't been this excited in years because it's the one thing that I think that when we had that when the book was called How the Brain Works, and I think people read it, and I suspect they were disappointed because it's what when you want to know how your brain works, you don't really want to know how neurons fire, right? That's kind of like you kind of want to know how does it create the sensation of yourself, right? How do you experience consciousness, all this type of stuff. And now we're doing these experiments that allow us to do that. So I'm super excited about that one because I think that's gonna if we get people to understand how this works, and I think we have a pretty good, and I know it sounds the same, but I think we've got a really good understanding. It's not our work. This is Michael Graziano at Princeton mainly. But it's a way that we can do it, and we can do it in classrooms and get kids to really understand what the idea of what the brain is actually doing is actually all about, which is super exciting.
So you're talking about exploring consciousness and trying to
in a mechanistic way, in a way that starts with from first principles of physics. We have students build circuits, and we have this thing. I'm sitting there, and I'm going to show it to you. But we have a device that has plastic on it. It's called Turing tumble, and you drop a marble, and the marble just moves these things around. And when you realize that the calculation you're doing with on a little circuit board, right, with LEDs adding up, two numbers, and you can do the same thing with gravity hitting plastic, and this is like electrons hitting silicon, right? And the computations are the same. And then you start to like, what if you're Minecraft, right? What if you're embedded in a reality that has these processes, you can't tell which, if you're being done from gravity or being done from electricity. So you're kind of at a different level above that. So that's how we start the conversation. And we start to build those models. And then I'll tell you really quickly about the experiment. One of the first experiments we do is in your arm where your muscles hit here, right? You have a neuron that is in the tendon. And that neuron is a stretch receptor. So if I move my arm forward, the neuron fires and it sends information to my brain. So if I close a kid's eyes and if I move this hand and I tell the kid to follow it with this one, so I move this one and he has his eyes closed, they're really good at matching what this is. So what does that mean? The brain is feeling the position of the proprioceptor of this one and is setting the motor unit over to this one to match it, right? And so now if I were to hit this one with a vibrator with your eyes closed, I hit this neuron with a vibrator, and what happens is that you make that neuron fire. So even with their eyes closed, now I'm just hitting, his arm is standing still, but this arm starts to go down as if the arm is moving because his perception is that the arm is moving. All right, so now here's the experiment that's super cool. So what's happening is that they're inside the brain, they're feeling their arm moving forward because they're getting the information from this arm that the arm should be stretching, but it's not. So they open up their eyes. Oh, it's cool because like one arm is down, one arm's up. But now what we do is we have them touch their nose, close their eyes, and we hit that vibrator on their arm. And so now their brain is getting sensation of their arms moving forward, but they also create the sensation of their nose touching their finger. And you wait a few seconds and people will report that their noses are growing out of their face because it feels super real, and people will get blown away by this. And this experiment was discovered in the 90s, right? This is called the Pinocchio illusion, but they never really had a good idea of what it was until more recently. And so there's a thing called the body schema, and we're starting to understand what the cortex actually does. It produces the feeling of your body. It's a three-dimensional representation from a highly dimensional set of neurons, and we can manipulate that so well. We can make you think your arms are going through the floor. We can make you think you have two arms on the right side. You can do all this cool stuff once you understand how the models work. And that's what we're trying to bring to the classroom, to get kids to really understand what it is that these spiking neural networks are actually doing inside the brain, and why, from an evolutionary point of view.
how does the work that you're doing, I'm really curious about how the work that you're doing translates either into like homeschools or the local education agencies, the school districts, the maybe university labs.
Yeah, so we target we target high schools mostly, but it bleeds through. So the thing about neuroscience is that it works on many levels. So we start around fifth grade, I would say, is where it really starts to take off, because in fifth grade, kids know a little bit about electricity and a little bit about cells, right? That's the basic knowledge you need to have. And then the cool thing is that each one of our experiments could be scaffolded, right? So you could have a very simple prep with a cockroach leg, and you ask about spike rate, right? Like how fast do neurons fire when you touch it, right? You can touch it soft, touch it hard. And then you start to build up. This is the basic information about rate coding inside of neurons. And then you can use that same prep later on and do neuropharmacology, or you could ask, even with the spikes, you could look at the refractory period. There's all these different stuff that you can build within that goes up into graduate school. So one of the classes I like to teach the most is at Woods Hole. It's the marine biological labs. It's the most built in 1880, one of the most prestigious. So many Nobel Prizes came out of that place, especially neuroscience, right? And so I teach graduate students there from Stanford, from these really fancy universities, and they do the same labs I do with fifth graders. But it's the questions you can ask are really the important thing in science. Right? It's not about the experiment you're doing. It's like you have the experiment, but what question can you ask to make that experiment more unique, or to give you insights that you never had before? And so, yeah, so we target high schools. So we're in negotiations with the National Science Teacher Association Press to develop a curriculum for them. And we're arguing that the NGSS is, if you look at the top NGSS curricula that are out there, the Open SciEd and some of that, there's not a lot of data collection. It's a lot of data analysts. You look at a data set. For equity purposes, I see why, but it's getting away from what scientists do. Scientists have to add. You can't look at a data set to be a scientist. You have to do the experiment. You have to be able to collect data. And so we stress that very much. And so we're hoping to start doing workshops with NSTA Press to kind of reinvigorate what NGSS was developed by scientists, right? To teach kids science by doing science. But I think for too long, it's kind of missed that level, and it's kind of getting into the kind of the old habits that we've been doing in the past, with kind of experiments that what the outcomes are going to be with these canned demos and stuff like that. So we're trying to put the exploratory stuff back into it, because the cool thing about neuroscience is that we don't fully understand how this stuff works, and there's discoveries to be had. I mean, we had a group of high school students in the Roboroach develop something that we put into our product. The Roboroach, it will adapt. So it's if you can steer that cockroach around, but after about 5 minutes, it just ignores the stimulation, right? And so a group of high school students in New York City wanted to know, why does it adapt? And they, instead of using our backpack, they hooked up. We do an experiment with using your headphone jack and getting cockroach legs to dance. Is one of our cool experiments. And so they looked at it. Maybe it's the repetitiveness of that stimulus, and so they were hooking up to their iPods and getting the cockroach. They noticed that it adapted much more slowly. And another group of students put blindfolds on the cockroach, and that adapted even slower, right? So it's like, these are cool experiments. And so what they figured out is it's like the brain is looking at maybe the more randomness of the stimuli being less expected. It's sort of continuing to pay attention to that one. And the other one about blindfolds, we never even thought of that one. It's like your brain is integrating touch and visual sensory information to make a judgment about what's real. And by blocking the vision, these students have extended the amount of time that cockroach will pay attention to the touch stimuli, right? So, yeah, no. So that's what we're trying to get into, is to get the excitement. I think what makes science exciting, it's not the learning aspect, it's the discovery stuff. And so getting kids to be able to ask a question, and the hardest part for the educator is to set the boundaries. What is the limits of which you can explore? And so we try to do with our curriculum. We don't just, one of the mistakes that we made early on was just kind of letting kids go wild, right? But it doesn't work. And so you have to, so we have a kind of a guided approach. So we have, 3 sets of experiments where it is a little bit more, we're telling you how to do it, but we're telling you how to do it to give you the experience of how to, what could be, like, first of all, how do you do the techniques? And then in the analysis, what are the things that you can and cannot do, right? And then by the time you get to the capstone, which is the 4th section of each part of the book, the students will ask their own questions, and they're already familiar with what questions can be asked, and we're hoping to see a lot of creativity come out of that.
It is. I think we're coming up on time, and I want to make sure that I'm sensitive to the amount of time you've got. You got another, say, 10, 15 minutes?
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Okay. Now, I'd love to know what you think what are the challenges, especially for the business, are over the next, say, 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, well, we have to transition off of grant. It's funny, remember talking to some friends of mine, and man, I don't know how you can do that. This soft money where you don't know you're going to get funded next year. And I was thinking like, yeah, it's like, it's very much you know, it's very much how I like to live my life. I like uncertainty. It makes my brain a little bit more, I'm more comfortable in that area than, because I get very bored if it's too static. But I'm telling you, the next 5 years is a little bit too uncomfortable even for me, right? It's
Yeah.
like the way things are going is going to be more difficult for educators, I think. There's at the same time that there's a lack of funding in for science, there's a lack of funding for education. And so we have to transition from grants to educators, and there's not a lot of money to be had right now. So I think costs are rising. So we'll have to figure out something. And so we're gonna yeah, our plan right now is I'm a AI guy, right? So I like computational neuroscience. We're coming up with ways to kind of take the things that I'm interested in, which is agentic AI stuff, and then making it part of our marketing strategy. We're gonna like try to see if we can use some of the tools that we do internally for our educational purpose and put it towards marketing. So I think it's our biggest challenge right now is, can we survive? I mean, and it's not bad. I mean, I complain about it, but I mean, I think as a company, that should be your number one goal, right? It should be to maintain, grow. And I think we've been quite happy with just inventing, and not so much in growing the company and growing the business. And so I think these types of challenges, it's not like we're startups. It's not like we only have like one or two products. We got so many ideas. I
Right.
even get it. We have a whole thing on plant electrophysiology, which I didn't even talk about, like Venus flytraps and recording from stuff and doing. So I think we've got a lot of pokers in the fire that we could try to see which one of these things that we can try to tweak. And man, wouldn't it be cool? Wouldn't it be cool? Like, and if you talk to me in 5 years, oh yeah, we got cut off from funding, so we had to do this, and now I don't have to write grants anymore. I can just just invent all these cool things all the time. And so that's always been the goal. It's just it just takes a little bit of it's like when you're a kid and you're belly aching about taking off the gun. Like, it just take you 5 seconds to do it. So maybe that's what it is. It's just like you just gotta suck it up, eat the peas, and figure out how to do marketing. So
Eat the
yeah,
peas. That's a
yeah.
that's a great quote. Okay. Then one of the last questions that I ask everyone is, what do you think that we aren't talking about or thinking about in edtech that we should be? What are we not paying attention to?
Uh, it's getting that. So like I think the era we're living through right now, I think we're gonna look back at this era and be absolutely disgusted with ourselves, that the model of attention has been built up by these tech companies, right? So we've gotten so used to giving away our attention to devices, right? That it's been really hard for educators to kind of grab that attention back. And so one of the things that we've focused on a lot is to kind of have that element of surprise, right? To give it in there. And so I remember like people have said to us, you're so different than all the other speakers we've had. And it's like, if you speak in a fifth grade classroom, they haven't developed the social graces to let you know when they're bored, right? And so they will let you know, because they'll just be like bored and like looking away and talking to them. And so like what we've had to do is come up with you have to keep changing it up and becoming more, you have to compete with that attention span, right? So coming up with ways, but still trying to do the science, right? And so I think our goals right now are to get discoveries are super sexy. They're super fun when you realize. And so one of the papers we published in the Science Teacher, that's NSTA Press, was teach the controversy. So there's certain aspects of science that we don't know what the answers are, right? And so I think the idea of getting students to put their stake in the ground, do an experiment, say what they want to do, gets people excited. It gets them really engaged in what science is about. I think the number one thing employers want are kind of independent thinkers, right? They want new employees to be able to solve problems and do that stuff. And the biggest complaint that we have is that they can't. Kids need to be told what to do. There's very high dependence upon their mentors or their teachers. And it's funny, even at the university level, the universities say, "Oh, what we don't give we teach them the science, or we teach them the arts, but what we're really teaching them is to think independently." But the number one complaint from employers is they don't think independently, and so I think the idea that is missing in ed tech is trying. I think that the biggest failure we have right now is the failure of agency within kids to get them to start thinking independently, to challenge what you're saying, or to challenge certain ideas and come up with ideas that would allow them to kind of seek out new opportunities, right? I've been seeing a slow decline in that for the past decade, and it's something that we're trying to work on independently. But it'd be cool if more people got on that board, on that ship, and tried to raise the waters with us.
Is there something that we can do with the folks who have already been kind of captured by that model of attention as you describe it?
Yeah, I mean, it's that's what I'm saying. I think it's absolutely bizarre. I mean, if you know how these circuits work, right? It's pretty much like cocaine. It's like these doom scrollers, right? The release of dopamine is such a powerful thing. Yeah, it's being conscious of it, right? So I think we're starting to get to the point where we've identified it. At least some sectors of society have, and I'm not joking. I think people are depressed. I think the amount of suicide, is like the loneliness, all this stuff has been skyrocketing since the release of these devices to kids, right? So uh, I think it'll take a while for the general public to understand it, and then to do something about it. So no, just being aware of it. Working with your students to I can't believe there's a debate about bringing phones into schools. Why is that even been discussed? Sorry for ed tech. You can use it. You can use some stuff in the classrooms, but I'm telling you, the switching to laptops is not. It's just your device follows you there. You've got to be more conscious about grabbing the attention away from these companies, right? And I think we have a responsibility as educators to do that, and a responsibility for ed tech to figure out ways you can do it. So our stuff is mostly analog. Like, we try to do things offline, but there's certain aspects of it where you need to use a computer. And so, but yeah.
Dr. Gage, if our listeners wanted to connect with you directly or with Backyard Brains, how would they do it?
Yeah, so we're at backyardbrains.com. If you reach out to me, say hello and tell me have ideas for experiments. We work with a lot of scientists, we work with a lot of educators, and so yeah, I'd love to chat more.
Okay, fantastic. Listeners, thank you for joining us today. We explored Dr. Gage's journey from neuroscience into entrepreneurship, how Backyard Brains bridges the gap between the lab and the classroom, at home and at school, and some of the business challenges in a company like Backyard Brains. We hope that today's conversation sparked some new insight or idea that you can pursue. And if it did, please share the episode with a colleague and join us here next time on Chalk and Code. Dr. Gage, thank you very much.
Cheers.
Thanks for tuning in. If today's conversation sparked new insights or challenged your thinking, we'd love to hear from you.
Visit flexion.us for more information and join us here next time on Chalk and Code.